Adam Golov, Marketing and Communications Manager at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I will be your moderator today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know we will allow time at the end of the webinar for questions and answers. So please write your questions in the chat area as they come to mind. If we don't have time to answer them all, we will make them available on our website. Also, there will be 3 polls during today's webinar. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. DCL services help you refine your document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, today and in the future. DCL serves a broad client base spanning all industries. Today we are thrilled to introduce Joan Lasalle, President of Laselle-Ramsay Incorporated, and Amber Swoop, Data Specialist of Data Strategies. Joan is President of Laselle-Ramsay and has over 25 years experience designing and developing new product content and training for high-tech, healthcare, finance, and insurance industries. Since 2000, Laselle-Ramsay has worked with their clients to help them move to the use of XML structured content to help streamline the development of content and customize output in multiple forms and formats. She is a past board member of the Content Management Professionals and a regular contributor at industry conferences. Joan holds a Master's of Education from the University of Oregon. Amber Swoop is an internationally recognized expert on data who specializes in helping teams design and implement unified content development environments for XML content. These environments provide custom, integrated support for authoring, storing, publishing, and localizing content. With over 20 years of experience in the information development field and 9 years of data expertise, Amber helps teams develop and optimize their environments to improve efficiency and reduce costs. In addition to co-authoring the data maturity model, Amber has authored numerous papers and articles on information design, development, and architecture, and has presented at leading industry conferences. Amber holds a Master's in Technical and Professional Writing and a certificate in Computer Technical Writing from Northeastern University. Without further ado, welcome Joan and Amber.
Hi everyone, this is Joan Lasalle, and I want to thank you for joining us today. You know, at the end of last year, we collaborated with DCL to conduct a survey on trends in training and educational content. The survey indicated that maintenance was a significant challenge. While we published the results of the survey, we wanted to take this opportunity to look at 5 components of a new approach to developing and delivering learning content that can help you meet this maintenance challenge that so many of you face. Before we get into the content of the webinar, I'd like to just restate that I'm president of Laselle-Ramsay, and since the 80s we've been really working a lot with high-tech companies, many other industries as Adam said, but mostly with high-tech companies to help them develop and deliver critical business information that ensures success. We have a particular focus on new product content, so helping companies get products out the door with all the information to support, use, and service them.
Hi, this is Amber Swope. I am an information architect at Data Strategies, and I want to take this moment to explain what DITA stands for, which is the Darwin Information Typing Architecture, which is an open standard supported by OASIS that is for XML content. So we'll get right into it. Joan?
So late last year, as I said, Laselle-Ramsay and Data Strategies collaborated with DCL to conduct a survey on content trends in education and training. And here's what we heard from our respondents about their major challenges. As you can see, the top challenge was maintenance, followed by lack of analytics, reduced budgets, time to market, out-of-date info, customer satisfaction, and globalization. We had 200 responses to the survey and published the results to all of the survey participants. And by the way, if you didn't get those results, you can download them from the Laselle-Ramsay or DCL websites today after this call. Today we want to focus on that top challenge, which is maintenance. But before we proceed, let's see if those of you that are on the call have the same challenges as those who took our survey. So Adam, can you bring up the first poll? Can you?
So right now, right.
Yes, we're ready for the first poll.
It's being fielded, and right now, with a little bit more than half of the participants voting, we have 67% indicating maintenance, 25% indicating out-of-date information, with 8% indicating time to market.
Great. So is the poll finished? We're not seeing it, so maybe you can help us by.
Sure. Let's give it a couple more seconds. We got almost 65% of people voted.
Awesome.
And we do appreciate the participants being able to give us some information, because this allows us to tailor our discussion today to what your needs really are. So thank you for participating.
Okay, so I'm going to close the poll now. And so to let you know, 64% indicated maintenance was their biggest challenge, followed by 21% stating out-of-date information, and then 7% for both lack of analytics and time to market.
Great. Well, it sounds like the challenge that we're going to address today is not only the challenge for our survey participants, but also for those of you that are on the call. So let's just step back a minute and talk about what is maintenance. For me, when I think of maintenance, I think of upkeep. And just like I'm most of you probably have regular servicing for your car, you have regular servicing for learning content. If you're learning content for a product or a service or an internal policy or procedure, the baseline is correct. So what happens if our content is not maintained? What happens if it's not correct? We believe that maintenance really links to all the other challenges. That's why we decided to address it today, and why we think that focusing on it is such an important aspect. If we also think that all of the challenges relate to maintenance, so that by fixing your maintenance problem, you can also address some of the other challenges that you face. Let's start by looking at analytics. One of the things that Amber likes to say is that not all content is created equal. If you don't have analytics beyond just basic facts, it can be hard to know where to invest your time with maintenance. What is the high-value content that's important to your learners and your business, that's most important? Learning organizations often track attendance at courses and completion rates, but it's hard to know where to spend your time to maintain the content without analytics.
So one of the benefits of having a structured set of content is that you have smaller units that you can measure. If you are trying to measure an entire course, then there's no way that you're going to know that one specific topic or one specific learning objective is more valuable than another. Or if you have questions, that if folks are taking quizzes and stuff, that you have better success rates with one versus another, unless you structure your content and manage it at these small modular units.
So all of us are being asked to do more with less, and that often means that something has to give. Unfortunately, in many instances, that's maintenance. Given the choice between new and existing material, the decision is almost always on the new, because that means in a product organization you can get that product to market. But reduced budgets put pressure on maintenance activities just because of that fact.
So how do you keep everything up to date? Well, one of the ways that you can do this is by having a single source of your content. Rather than having 4 or 5 different sources of your content, one for each of the deliverable types that you currently present, having a single source of your content allows you to significantly reduce the work involved with maintenance by being able to make that update one time instead of as many different times as you currently do it. And that is a huge opportunity, because all that time that you are spending on doing the same work, because right now you might have to just say, okay, we're going to correct this one thing because it's the most important thing, and it takes you 5 actions to do it. Well, instead of doing that, you could be updating 5 things, and that's what a single source really gives you.
So I spoke a little bit about the pressure to always focus on the new, and that is because our cycle times have gotten so much shorter, not only with changes to the organization internally, where you might be training your workforce, but also with getting products out into the market. And in technology, in the last few years, we've really, a lot of software companies especially, have moved to software as a service or cloud-based delivery of their product. And what that means is that they're almost on continuous development cycles. And when you're in that continuous development environment, it's very, very difficult and can be extremely challenging to address the market, the maintenance issue, your maintenance issues.
And one of the things that our proposal includes is that, again, going back to smaller units. And one of the things about this is that you will be able to update smaller units, which means that you don't have to send an entire course out for review. If you needed to only update one learning objective with associated content, including assessment, you could update just those pieces and have them reviewed and be able to release that information. And if your pipelines allow you to do this, then you could actually, for instance, if you have printed content, you would update the printed content. You'd have the content in your single source. It would be updated, maybe only published once a year for your printed materials. But you might want to update the live, and you can't see me doing little rabbit ear quotes in the air, live content in your LMS every time the content changes. And that's, you get feedback from students, oh, this question wasn't the best question, or the answer was wrong. You don't have to wait a year to update that. You can update just that question if your publishing channels allow for that. And because you're doing the work in modular units, you can reduce that time so that you have a possibility of what some folks are referring to as sim ship or simultaneous shipment. Rather than having to start on a sprint and update 5 different pieces to get to the same point, you update one single source of the content and generate the 5 different outputs, and that way you can reduce that time to market and get that simultaneous shipment that you want.
So when you have all this pressure on maintenance, you don't have the analytics, your budget is reduced, and your time to market is very short, your information can become out of date, easily out of date. And what is the effect of that on your customers? Well, in some markets there's an effect on the customers, but there's also an extreme effect on the business as well. In highly regulated markets, such as medical devices, out-of-date content can mean that you're not able to sell your device. If your device has been updated, your content doesn't match it, then you're out of compliance with federal regulations. And incorrect training in that same industry can have an effect on the delivery of care. It actually can affect how well the device can be used. So up-to-date content is critical. You have to keep content current in order to stay in compliance in those kinds of environments.
And in addition to compliance, if I take a course, let's say I'm doing internal training for sales, and I hear how I'm supposed to position your product, and then I go back to my office and I get prepared for my customer calls, and the supporting materials don't match what I learned in the training, then I'm not going to be able to effectively sell our product. And this is one of the ideas around customer confusion. When I say customer, I mean a learner, whether it's an internal person or an external person. If a customer is confused, that means that your learning experience has not has not succeeded.
And this relates directly to customer satisfaction. If content is not maintained and is out of date, that can result, as Amber said, in customer confusion and impact your customer satisfaction scores. What happens if somebody goes to a training course and in a lab they learn one way to make a change, say, to a configuration? They go back to their office, they're going through that material again, and rather than use their training materials, they go on to a website and they look up that same information, and the information that they're seeing tells them something different. How do they sort that out? That's lack of alignment and lack of consistency really affects customers' ability to do their job, and it affects their satisfaction with your product overall.
And this goes to customer confidence as well, because if I don't know that I know how to do it correctly, I'm going to start doubting all the other information, and I'm going to go scurrying around asking other people how to do it. Another piece that this relates to in the newer delivery technologies is that customers have a way to give you on-the-spot feedback about whether they're happy with something or not. In the learning area for educational publishing, for instance, being able to take a test or a practice test and be able to indicate right there, was this a good question? Did I feel confident that this related to the learning objective so that I could feel confident that when I go to pass that exam, then I'm going to be ready? And being able to have that satisfaction, particularly on, for instance, if you're doing test prep, this rating is surfaced, this customer satisfaction rating is surfaced in your sales information and by people who are doing reviews of your content. So in the old days, you might say, oh, well, customer satisfaction was tough to measure. It's not so much anymore, and it's highly visible across the board to potential customers as well.
So one of the things that we found interesting in the survey was that even though many of the survey participants came from global industries, came from businesses that were global, large businesses, not very many people were translating their content. And while we don't have a direct relationship, we think that that could be because translated content is often very difficult to maintain. If you translate an instructor-led course, for example, into 5 languages, all of a sudden, in many environments, you're going to have 5 courses to maintain. So if maintenance is already a problem for you in one language, multiplying that by 5 can be a real problem and challenge.
And the challenge here is that if you had 5 sources of content and you translated all 5 of them, you've exponentially grown your maintenance load. If you're working in XML, XML separates the content from its formatting, which makes it an ideal source format for content that is being localized or translated. And what this means is that if I have a single source of content, I update the English, and then I only send the units that I've made to update it to localization, and they update the content and don't touch the tags, and they're able to leverage the processing that when you have XML, you render it by putting it through a processor that does a transformation that generates the output. And because the XML separates the content from the formatting, you can have language-specific formatting automatically generated. So you're not in there maintaining, going in and hand-deleting and copying and pasting all these little pieces. You can automate the formatting and really give the learner their information in the language that they wanted.
So we've talked about how maintenance really affects a lot of challenges that you're having today. Why is it that maintenance is so hard and a difficult challenge to address? We think that other results that we got in our survey may provide some clues. So first, the dominant tool set was the Microsoft Office Suite, PowerPoint, and Word. And while these tools are certainly the workhorses of many learning and training organizations, they do not always make it easy to automate changes to the content, especially across an entire curriculum. So when you have a set of courses within a curriculum, all of them needing to be maintained, you want to find a way to automate that. In addition, our survey indicated that 73% of our respondents are producing print materials. Print is static and it's hard to maintain. And in today's fast-paced environment, it may go out of date even by the time it gets to your learners. Another thing the survey indicated was the fact that ownership of learning content is fragmented. It's developed and delivered by individual business functions or groups rather than being owned by a single corporate university. This means that all groups have their own processes and procedures, use their own tool set, and are working on their own schedule. This makes standardization harder to implement, and it's harder to get alignment across those groups. This fragmentation attributes to the difficulty in maintaining content. And finally, SMEs are developing content. This is what our survey showed. This means that content development is probably not their primary responsibility, and they may not own the content. When that happens, it's harder to get them to do the upkeep tasks that maintenance requires, and it's hard to justify their time, especially if you don't have analytics to support your requests. So is there a better way? We've talked about maintenance, how maintenance is linked to all the challenges. How can you fix it? How can you find a path to get from where you are today to content that's easier to maintain? And we want to suggest, as our webinar title indicated, that there are 5 components that we want to talk about for the rest of the webinar. The first one is content design. And when we're talking about learning, content design means instructional design. Sound instructional design means that we know what works. We know what drives performance for the learner and results for the business. Instructional design uses learning and performance objectives to achieve results. These objectives need to align with learner expectations and with the business goals. They also need to align with the content. In the model we're proposing, learning objectives can be a critical tool to keeping your content up to date. As learning becomes more modular and flexible and delivered in different ways, learning objectives can provide a way to keep the content aligned. If a learning objective changes, the content associated with it needs to change as well.
And as Joan mentioned, in order to have this experience to be a good learning experience, the content needs to be more modular because people want content delivered in many different ways. It's not just instructor-led training anymore. There's any number of different ways that we need to provide this content, and it needs to be flexible so that we can combine the learning information along with the assessment in ways that each individual learner needs it. And what we're talking about then is having a single source. And that single source, as I mentioned before, our proposal is that you use a single source of XML content. In this presentation, we're going to be discussing the Darwin Information Typing Architecture, and that the structured modules that are in this neutral source are available for update. So you update it again. I keep saying it over and over. You update it one time. You get out of the copy-paste paradigm that you're copying and pasting. And no matter how many times you do it, it always seems that you miss one place. And instead of focusing your efforts on the copying and pasting, you focus your efforts on the content development, and that you make the maintenance becomes a single action where you go and you update that initial source, and then you feed it out to these different deliverables rather than having to maintain each deliverable separately.
Now that you've got this single source, what are you storing in this single source, and how do you get the flexibility that Amber's talking about? You need control. You need structured content. So let's define structured content. First, it's modular, not linear. It's a standardized approach to content elements and content types, and those types follow a consistent pattern. For example, content that tells learners how to do something is task-based information. In learning task information, in learning courses, task information can be found in demos, procedures, labs, and exercises. If these tasks are developed as standalone topics, they can often be reused and repurposed across all of those different types of information or presentation formats. When you develop structured content, you need to analyze your content to determine the purpose of that content. Is it reference information? Is it a concept? Is it a process or a procedure? Then each of these topics or content types follow a consistent model and can be used as building blocks in your courseware. So based on that definition of structured content, Adam, let's do our second poll. And we need you to help us understand what's happening, Adam, because we can't see the poll on our screen.
Right now, 3/4 of the, well, it's fluctuating, with about a quarter of the, 50% of the attendees have voted. It's 60% saying yes, 40% saying no. Right now, with 65% voted, it's 57% yes, 43% no. With just under 80% voted, it's still 53% yes. It's 53% yes now, 47% no. We'll give it a few more seconds before I close the poll.
You're like Johnny on the spot reporter, letting us know, moment by moment.
I'm going to close the poll now, but we're at 53% yes, 47% no. Oops.
Those are, thank you, Adam. Those are really interesting numbers. One of the reasons I say that it's interesting because when I talk to folks that are instructional designers, a lot of them have, they think of their instructional design as giving them that structure, and many of them, they start their content either with the assessment or with the learning objectives and then the assessment and then the instructional content. But I'm going to move along and talk about how DITA supports this. So in order to have these small units that give you the flexibility, in DITA they're called topics, hence the Darwin information typing architecture. These topics are typed. And Joan mentioned a few of the types, task, concept, reference, we have glossary, but DITA also supports out of the box in DITA 1.2 learning-specific structures. So, for instance, there's the learning overview topic that structures learning objectives among other types of introductory information that you would have at the beginning of a unit, at the beginning of a course. There's learning summary to help you put that bookend on the end to say, oh yes, and here's what you should have learned, and here's some additional resources. There's learning content, there's learning plans, but one of the key pieces that my clients use most often is the assessment topic, and it has out-of-the-box support for 7 assessment types. Open question for essays, single select, multiple select, true, false, sequencing, and matching. 8, hot spot. And what you can do is you can create your content in these smaller units that you can then manage and update and maintain as you need. And then you collect them together into units with a DITA map. And what the map does is it allows you to bring together content, and if you're doing instructional design based upon the learning objectives, you would say, oh, for Unit 1 it has these 3 learning objectives. We want all the content that's appropriate for this course or this unit to be referenced from this map. And that is how DITA really supports your instructional design and can become part of your environment for structured content. Here's an example of a learning overview topic that has obviously lesson objectives. And as you can see on the left, there is the XML. I'm showing it to you this way simply so I can show you the tags. Most of my teams have UIs that are designed so it looks much more less technical. It's form-driven. But you can see on the output when it's been generated, this screenshot is from a PDF from an instructor manual. And the content looks probably the same way it would if you typed it into Word, But unlike if it were just in Word, you have all this semantic structure behind it that you can manipulate and update and track. And so that makes it easier to use. And then we go into multi-channel delivery. So one of the things I've been referring to is the idea that you can have your topics, you have your maps, you run through a transform, and you can go out to HTML. So these slides are in HTML. You can generate PDFs. So you need that for compliance. You need it for instructor manuals. Maybe your syllabus needs to be in a PDF. LMS. So you can do a transform to generate custom XML or a score package. Or you can generate an EPUB. Many folks are moving away from, or in addition to providing PDFs, they're generating ebooks so that folks have a better experience when they're using the content on a mobile device such as a phone or a tablet.
So before we go move on to our next topic, I just would like to add that one of the things that we often see is that folks will take an ILT course to get multi-channel delivery. Folks will take an ILT course and basically port that course to an e-learning format, and then they'll turn it into a mobile format without taking the time to think through what content is best delivered in which channel. This is really, this approach really gives you a great way to achieve blended learning, which we know is something that can be really effective for our learning audience. If the content is modular and topic-based and organized using data in a single repository, you can generate different types of content through different channels, 4 different channels, through that single source of information. A phone, for example, is not a good learning experience for a full course or even a module, but it may be perfect for a job aid or flashcards. And some of those may come from the same content that you're using in your ILT course, for example. But with this approach, it's a different map. You generate it out through a different transform to get the end result that you need.
So Adam, I believe we have our third poll at this point.
Yep, let me launch it right now.
Awesome. Okay. And one, the slide doesn't show this, but another output that folks use is another flavor of XML. A lot of mobile applications consume XML, and so if you have your content structured in DITA and you run can design the transform, you can take that single source of information that has all the structure to feed all these other deliverables, run the transform, and get the XML that can be delivered via your mobile app.
Okay, with just under half the attendees voting, we have 8% indicating print, 42% indicating PDF. Oh, it just changed. It's now 38% PDF, 31% HTML, 15% HTML5, and 8% indicating EPUB. And that is with just about 65% have voted.
Excellent. So regardless of what the numbers are on each of the delivery channels, what you're saying to us is that you have more than one pipeline that you're trying through which we're trying to deliver your information. And again, coming back to how this affects maintenance, if you're having to maintain a different source for each one of these channels, it's going to make that exponentially more difficult to keep your content up to date.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll now.
Awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome.
So if you're generating multiple deliverables and you're creating content in a single source, how can you find it? If you're creating content as courses, you find the content by the course name. But when you're writing content as standalone modules and storing it in a common source, how are you able to find the information, again, so that you can maintain it? How do you organize it? One of the ways that you can do that is with metadata. Metadata is both structural, to help you categorize and organize topics, and it's also descriptive to help you find and retrieve content. It helps you find information by relevant criteria. When you create your content, you want to identify relevant information, just like in a library where you can find a book by a catalog number or by an author or by a title. You'll need metadata to find the content that you've created and help you find the exact content that you need to maintain.
And an additional way that you can use metadata is to take your learning objectives and rather than just using them as content, use them as metadata. Use them as the key for how you develop your content and then relate it, that learning objective, to all its associated content. Because if you are using a rigorous instructional design, or even a loose instructional design that has learning objectives, then you can associate that content, and in your repository, DITA has out-of-the-box support for such classification and taxonomy support, but perhaps you have a repository that also can do it in a different way. But what you want to be able to do is, if you need to create a course, you want to be able to say, oh, it has to have these learning objectives. You want to have all the related information right at your fingertips, and that's where taking that content that you're already using and making it metadata really gives you a great deal of power. And like I said before, and let's say that you have a release and then the next release the learning objective changes. Well, you simply update the learning objective once, and it then can be that updated text is applied then to all its related components. So what this does is it leads to adaptive content. So an example of the metadata as adaptive content is the idea that maybe I'm a professional, and I need to get some certification, re-up my certification because it expires every 3 years. Well, I would like to take a quiz at the beginning that says, oh, okay, these are, I have to learn these 5 things. And I take the quiz, and it shows that I very clearly understand the information around the first 3 learning objectives, but the last 2, I need a refresher. Well, I don't want you to give me a course that has all the content for all 5 learning objectives, because I'm busy. I obviously know this. I just showed you that I knew it, and when I passed the quiz, give me instruction that focuses on the 2 areas where I need to learn more, but then give me assessment that verifies that, yeah, I wasn't just lucky on the first part on the first quiz, that I really do know it, because I need to be able to pass whatever the certification exam is that I require to, obviously be successful in my business.
As learning professionals, we know that big monolithic curriculums just don't work anymore. We know that one size doesn't fit all, and that's from the business perspective, where there may be individual customized products for a large account. It also doesn't work with learners. Folks just don't want or need to start at the beginning and work through to the end in every situation. They really want learning that meets their needs. And that may mean that you generate, as Amber said, a course for various roles. That can be audience-specific in terms of a group, or potentially even for a person. Our approach is focused on today's challenge of maintaining your content, and that means that it supports this adaptive content model, which is the direction we're all trying to go today. And one of the keys to adaptive content is learning in your native language. This is especially true in workforce training, where translating content into a native language can not only be helpful, it can give learners a personalized experience. But translation and localization can be difficult and time-consuming, especially if you're managing your content at the course level. Again, if you translate a course into 5 languages, guess what? Now you have 5 courses to maintain. Your maintenance load has just gone up 5-fold. But if you manage your content at the topic level, as we suggested, in a single source, you can automate this process.
And not only are we talking about the single source, but here's again where the XML comes into play. Here's an example of a task topic. This is how to sign into Google. Notice that it has structured steps. This could be used as an exercise. It could also be used as information that's up on the website. Notice that it was written in English. And we have these as semantically identified items. And in English, things are presented certain ways. So for instance, a common convention for indicating when you are selecting a user interface item is to have it be bold in English. However, if I translate it into Swedish, here we have a style sheet that also has it being represented, the sign-in in step 2 in bold for that UI control, but it might not need to be in bold. Maybe in Swedish it needs to look different. We see this a lot, particularly in double byte character sets such as Japanese. There's no bold in Japanese. And instead of having to go in and manually take out all the formatting and change the formatting every time you go to a new language, if you have your content in neutral XML, notice that the structure is exactly the same. The elements are exactly the same. The only thing that has changed is the actual text. And when I run the transform, I can have a language-specific style sheet that if the UI control is not supposed to be bold in Swedish, it can be represented automatically as it needs to be, as long as I've designed the transform with that in mind.
So here's the big takeaway that we wanted to share with you in this webinar, and that's that maintenance is a major challenge. That's what we're hearing from you. That's what we heard on our survey. So it's something that we have to look at. So that's the problem. And it's a problem that touches a lot of other challenges like globalization, translation. How do we keep things up to date? How do we drive a positive customer experience? It touches all of these things. But if we address the maintenance challenge with these 5 key components that we shared with you today, guess what? We enable the future. We make it possible for you to have more customized courses that are adaptive to the learner needs and to the business needs. And this means that your content can be more varied to meet multiple needs, deliver the content in multiple forms and formats, again to drive higher customer satisfaction and actually a better learning experience and a chance to really achieve performance objectives. That is everyone's goal.
Yeah, when I talk to instructional designers, a lot of them express frustration that all they seem to do is copy and paste and copy and paste. And the proposal here is that you stop doing that. It's a radical proposal. It would require taking a step back and re-evaluating how you develop your content, but in the long run, it would allow you to have a single source of information so that your maintenance is down to maintaining one source and allowing you to spend more time on creating the content that your learners need rather than updating 5 different sources of the same information simply by copying and pasting. So that is what we had to present. We tried to leave time for questions, and we came in right on time, which is always a nice achievement. So Adam, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do, and thank you both, Joan and Amber, for this very informative webinar. The first question that has come in is, how many LMS tools are out there today that accept DITA-tagged content as input?
Well, the key here is that you don't have to give the LMS DITA-tagged input. What you do is you have your content, you transform it, and generate the SCORM package or whatever the LMS needs. So that, remember, we're separating the source from the delivery. So if you need a certain version of SCORM with a certain set of metadata for the rules, you design a transform that takes the appropriate information from your DITA content and packages it into the compiled format that can be then imported into your LMS.
I think one of the things, if I could just add, Adam, one of the things that we often see is that, especially in the learning environment, that folks don't see the folks see the LMS as a content repository and not as a delivery channel, and so they assume that the LMS has to do all of the work that we're trying to get from our approach, which is all of these other things. In our approach, LMS is, as Amber said, it's a delivery channel. So you can build a transform that will give you the output that you need. And that's really important because in large organizations, you can often have multiple LMSs. And people can struggle with, well, we can't do this because we have multiple LMSs. Well, guess what? You can build a transform for each one of those LMSs, and you don't have to drive this big monolithic change in your organization. You can accommodate what you have today and just do it better and faster.
Thank you both for those answers. The next question that has come in is, are there easy ways to use tools for creating XML content?
And the answer here is they get better and better every day. So there's a couple of things to mention here. So the first is that DITA is an ever-evolving spec, and one of the things that the technical committee at OASIS realized was that most organizations, they need something that's pretty simple and lightweight, and we want to focus on the appropriate capture of the content. So there's an effort underway to develop, first of all, a lightweight version of DITA that has only what folks need. And so if you are interested in this, I highly encourage you to go out to OASIS and look at the DITA technical committee. So that's for the source itself, for the architecture. As for tools, there are new tools coming on the market all the time that provide a, and I want to say, a customizable experience for authoring. And as a person who loves being in the weeds on this stuff, I love having the tags on. Many of my clients, honestly, do not. And there are many tools that are XML editors that are able to provide an interface that, if it doesn't entirely hide the tagging, makes it so that it looks very similar to an experience that folks either are used to or that is easy for them to use. For instance, for developing assessments, many folks are used to using a question tool that you go in, you fill in, say, oh, I'm going to create a single select multiple choice question, and a form pops up, and you fill in the STEM, you fill in the stimulus, you add the distractors, you indicate which one's correct, you provide feedback at the distractor level if it's wrong. Most of the tools that folks use are very forms-based. You can get XML editors and configure them to look exactly the same way. Again, it's not without work, but the tool that you're currently using wasn't designed without work as well.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think that this is a major objection that many people have, and so a lot of the tools manufacturers are addressing it, and as Amber said, it gets better every day. Because there are workarounds for it. You can customize things so that it looks very much like a WYSIWYG editor that people are familiar with. But it is something that you shouldn't step away from this because you have an assumption that you can't find something that will work for people who do not want to work in a tag-based editor.
Thank you both. The next question that's come in is, can you generate PowerPoint?
A transform can generate whatever you need it to generate. The question is, do you need PowerPoint or do you need slides? So, for instance, these slides that we presented today are in. They were sourced from DITA, and it was a transform that generated HTML. And so, in that case, for our purposes, we didn't need PowerPoint. There are times when folks do need PowerPoint. So, really quickly, the benefit of doing this from HTML is that we can embed all different types of videos, things like that, and it can be device or operating system agnostic, depending, and it can be adjustable to the screen size, etc. However, and also we're looking at things saying, okay, we want to have a slide library that we can plug and play and move things around, and so we don't want to be changing the content on the slides a lot. If you're in a situation where the person who's delivering the content also needs to edit it, and PowerPoint is the tool of their choice, you can do a transform that takes them into PowerPoint where they could then make changes and then do their delivery. But keep in mind then that any changes that they've made do not get back into the single source unless you go back and update them. But that's okay in some cases. In some cases, that information is just for the context, that specific delivery, and doesn't belong back in the content library from which you generated the original, the starting point that they used for their course, for their slides.
Thank you. The next question has come in is, how do you handle video?
Well, the thing about DITA is that it is referencing videos and images, so it has the trigger there, and in this case, we don't have any video. Maybe we should add video to one of these. Is that it just embeds a reference to the video file, and because this is running in a browser, I would be able to click it, and it would just run in the browser as the video file would if you clicked it from the website.
So you can bring in images, you can bring in video, you can bring in audio. You have the same flexibility, and the advantage is if it's in a repository, it's easier to find, easier to maintain or update it or change it. It's all in one place, so you don't have to go scampering around to say, I know I saw that video someplace, and try and track it down.
Thank you. And the last question that has come in is, can this approach support mobile content delivery?
Oh, yeah. So when we talk about mobile content delivery, the first question we have to say is, what does that really mean? Does that mean just taking what you have and putting it on a PDF and making me look at it on my phone? If we're talking about mobile delivery through a mobile application, which means that there's an application that's designed for me when I look at this. So for instance, if I read a book on my iPad, or I should just say my tablet, I could look at a PDF and it's not the best experience. But if I have an ebook that's in Kindle as an app, then I get a better user experience. The app manages that experience. But what gets put through to the app? Sure, you can have your content, and that exact same book could go to your InDesign folks for layout, and then they could, if you want to have the exact same layout for both your pretty print book and your ebook, you could, InDesign has capabilities to generate the ebook from there. I have other folks that don't go into InDesign, so they don't need, again, that pretty print look. They just have to have something that is clear and concise and attractive, and they can generate directly from the DITA content out to an ebook, and then it can be used. So the DITA Open Toolkit contains, I want to say, 8 or 9 out-of-the-box transforms. So if you download it, and you can just go and try it out for free. The toolkit is for free. You can go and download any of the XML editors that support DITA. They should include the toolkit. And the EPUB is actually an out-of-the-box transform that is there. Keep in mind that it's not going to look exactly like what you have. You'd have to do some customization for the style sheets. But you just take some test files and run it through, and you can see what kind of EPUB support if that's what you want. Or if you need XML that then goes into a mobile app, you can generate that as well. And I have folks that do that for flashcards and for quizzes that folks take on their phones.
I just want to restate the point that I made when we were talking about this, which is a lot of folks think that they need to, again, manage their content at the course level. And if they're going to have multi-channel publishing, they have the full course in all different formats. And really, this is one of the benefits of this. It doesn't always seem like a benefit, but it really is. Is that using this new approach often gives you time to rethink what your instructional strategy is going to be for these different environments and in different locations and on different platforms or devices. And I think that can be a real advantage to the learner in giving them what they need when they need it. What they need when they need it, how they need it. That's like a common thing that's been talked about for years and years and years. But it's really, with using this kind of an approach, it really gives you the ability to control and target your content with the flexibility to support these multiple different types of learning environments.
Yeah, I mean, basically you're not locked into giving everybody everything all the time on every device. You have your pool of content, and you can pick and choose what's the appropriate content for this device, for this learner. And you only have to maintain one source of it. So it looks like we're out of time, but if you have questions, here are our email addresses. We would love to hear from you. If you have any questions or suggestions on how we could do a better job if we ever do this presentation again, please let us know. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Joan and Amber, and thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. You'll be receiving emails from both DCL and Laselle-Ramsay alerting you to future webinars and when you can view this recorded version. You'll also be able to review the recorded version on both of our websites located at www.dclab.com and www.lr.com. This concludes today's broadcast. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.